I think Zola Jesus should start going by the name Zola Jesus, because that just sounds way cooler. I mean, come on, Zola Jesus. It sounds much better than Zola Jesus. I mean, it just does. In regards to Okovi though, I think that this is one of those occurrences where the lead-off tracks prior to the album were much better and led me to believe that the album was going to be different to what we actually got. Although this album is filled with a lot of quality songs and some really dark and twisted moments that I find really compelling, the more listens I did give this album, the less gratifying the results were. The sound and the aesthetic of this album really wore off on me quite quickly, and I must have given this album about 6 or 7 listens, and the last listen I gave earlier today was the least enjoyable one for me. I realised that Zola Jesus wasn't really doing a great amount with the vocals. A lot of the tracks sounded quite similar, and the idea of the album was cool, but I think again it just felt a bit meh by the end of it. I do have to mention some of the greater songs on this album though, because there are plenty of them. I mean, Soak with the industrial booming intro and that chorus as well with the percussion that kind of like slams in really well. And Zola's voice on this chorus sounds really good as well. You should know. I do have to commend Zola as well on this album for making songs like Witness, which is a very much like a classical sounding song. It's very orchestral, and yet it still really fits into the album very well. Never once do they feel out of place. It's just maybe I was hoping for more of the industrial sounding tracks like Soak. And maybe that's kind of part of the issue on this album. I mean, even when she does switch up the instrumental and changes the sound completely, it still sounds kind of similar to what was going on before. It's a very weird kind of thing that goes on in this album. Tracks like Siphon that have a bit too much percussion over melody, I don't know, I feel like there was just too much of a bit of like empty space to this track between like the percussion. It just kind of felt very hollow to me. And again with the vocals here, it's not like she's changed anything all that much. She's pretty much doing the same thing over this kind of instrumental. It's weird, you know, I came into this album thinking it was really good and I was really wanting to praise Zola Jesus because there are a lot of great ideas here. It's just that for me, I've just ended up feeling a bit meh on this album. Another track though that stands out as a massive highlight for me is Remains. I mean, the way that track kind of starts off a bit slow and then that beat comes in there, almost like a speed garage song you'd hear from the UK. It's kind of like a weird turn for her, but it sounds so good. And for me, I think her vocals shine the most on this song. I mean, where she's going into that really like high, almost screeching falsetto, I really think that works well for her, so well. The overarching concept of this album though is pretty cool. I can't criticise this at all. She wrote this during a time where a lot of people around her were, you know, facing death and people died. So Okovi is actually a word that means shackles, and the idea that shackles are attached to us all because there's no escaping death. It's not exactly the first time anyone's ever done a death metaphor on an album, but I actually quite like that as a analogy for this title and the concept of the album. And I also do like that Zola Jesus is pretty much in her own lane here. I mean, you're probably not going to hear any Gothic pop music for the rest of the year or any other point ever, really. And especially not done in this kind of way with its industrial sounds and the classical elements creeping in. I do really appreciate this album for what it is. I do recommend it, but unfortunately I'm just not sure how much shelf life it has in the long run, especially since only after so many listens I got a bit bored of this. But you know, I think you should check it out anyway. For me, this is a C. A lot of great tracks on here that I do think are worth replaying. Just as an overall album though, it just kind of grows old. Not exactly a huge amount of fleshed out ideas on this album that were presented in the singles for me. So yeah, it's okay. If you like this review though, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more reviews on pretty much a daily basis. Let me know what I should review next, and have a good day.